In March of 2026, a story started with just a few concerned students in Canterbury, England. But it quickly, and I mean quickly, spiraled into a national health emergency. And the thing is, this wasn't just a local headline. It turned out to be one piece of a much larger global puzzle. A puzzle of a disease that can strike with absolutely terrifying speed. So today, we're going to break down the 2026 meningitis outbreaks.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at that explosive outbreak in the UK. Then we'll get into the science of the disease itself. After that, we'll uncover a really critical vaccination gap that left thousands vulnerable before zooming out to see how similar crises were actually unfolding across the world. And finally, we'll look at how public health is fighting back.
All right, so our story begins in Canterbury, a university city in Kent. And in the span of just 1 week, what could have easily been dismissed as a few students getting sick, well, it became something far more serious. Something officials would soon be calling unprecedented.
This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that feeling on the ground. For students, for staff, for parents, there was this real sense of panic as a totally normal week of classes and socializing just turned into a public health crisis that seemed to come out of absolutely nowhere. Just look at this timeline. It shows the sheer velocity of this crisis. I mean, over a single weekend, we go from the very first reports to the tragic confirmation of 2 deaths. By the end of that week, it's a full-blown national incident. That is how fast this disease can move, from a small cluster to a major crisis in just 5 days. The public health response had to be just as fast, and it was massive. The focus was squarely on the students living in the university halls. That was the epicenter of the outbreak. 5,000 people were targeted for vaccinations and preventative antibiotics as authorities just raced to contain the spread. So to really get why the response was so urgent, we need to understand the threat itself. What exactly is this disease that can cause so much devastation and do it so quickly? Okay, so here's the crucial point. The same bacteria can cause 2 different life-threatening conditions. You have meningitis, which attacks the protective membranes around your brain, and then you have septicemia, which is a severe infection of the blood. Both can progress with terrifying speed, and both need immediate medical attention. And this right here, this is what makes it so dangerous. Look at those early signs: fever, headache, muscle pain. In a university setting, it is incredibly easy to mistake this for the flu, a bad cold, maybe even a hangover. But while that's happening, the bacteria is multiplying. And then the critical, life-threatening symptoms appear, like that telltale rash that doesn't fade under pressure. By the time you see that, the clock is really ticking.
So this leads us to the central question of the Kent outbreak, right? Why this group? Why were university students so uniquely vulnerable? Well, the answer lies in a specific bacterial strain and a gap in the UK's vaccination armor. Lab tests came back fast, and they confirmed the culprit, meningitis B, or MEN-B. Now, this wasn't some new or exotic strain. In fact, it's responsible for most of the meningococcal cases in the United Kingdom. Knowing that specific strain was the key that unlocked the rest of this puzzle.
And here it is. This is the core of the issue. See, since 2015, babies in the UK have gotten a vaccine against MEN-B, but the routine vaccine given to teenagers protects against 4 different strains: A, C, W, and Y. Crucially, it does not protect against MEN-B. So this created a really dangerous immunity gap. The entire group of university students in 2026 was born before that MEN-B vaccine was introduced for babies. So you have a whole generation left unprotected against the country's most common strain, all living in the exact kind of close contact places, dorms, nightclubs, where this bacteria spreads most effectively. So now, let's zoom out, because while Kent was facing this unprecedented crisis, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was just one face of a global resurgence of meningitis in 2026, with different strains finding and exploiting different vulnerabilities in different communities all over the world. This slide right here is really the centerpiece of our whole explainer. In the UK, you have MEN-B exploiting that immunity gap among students. At the same time, in Chicago, an outbreak of MEN-Y was hitting adults in homeless shelters, a population that faces huge challenges in just accessing healthcare. And then you look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, a deadly MEN-W135 outbreak in a school dormitory with a devastating 38% fatality rate, partly because previous vaccination campaigns there had only targeted a different strain.
So you have 3 different locations, 3 different strains, but one shared story of a deadly, highly adaptable bacteria. Seeing these distinct but related crises side by side, it just raises the most important question of all. How do we stop this from happening again? What does the path forward actually look like? Well, the good news is that we have the tools to fight back. Public health isn't just about reacting to a crisis. It's about building layers of defense to prevent one from even starting in the first place. So let's take a look at what those defenses are. This multi-layered approach is absolutely key. It starts with those immediate actions, like giving preventative antibiotics to thousands of students in Kent who might have been exposed. It includes something called ring vaccination to quickly protect those most at risk during an outbreak. But really, the long-term solution is closing those immunity gaps through routine vaccination and using global surveillance to track which strains are circulating where, so we can try to stay one step ahead. And this really is the question that defines the fight against meningitis in 2026 and beyond. We have these incredible tools, from the MenB vaccine that could have protected those students in Kent to the brand new Men5CV 5-strain vaccine that's now being rolled out in Africa. But as science advances, the greatest challenge, it remains the same. Making sure these life-saving innovations actually reach everyone, and that no one gets left behind in a gap in our defenses.